Welcome, welcome. So excited for all of you to be here today and to be watching this later on. Recording this so that if you're missing it or if you have to go in and out, if you can't stay for the whole time, no problem. You're going to have a recording. And I expect that some of you will come in and out, and that when you watch the recording, you may not watch the whole thing at one time. But even if you're here live or you're planning to watch it all at once, there may be times where there isn't quite enough time for you to complete the exercises. So there's just a lot to get through in this time frame. And so you'll be able to go in and out, and you'll be able to pause for longer if you're watching the recording and have more time to complete the exercises that you see. And I'm going to talk you through the exercises that are here in the workbook because I have some things I want to share about it that have worked for others in the past. So I want to make sure that all of it makes sense and that you understand how to tie everything that you do together. Now, it's very likely that if you are watching this, you have already looked through the workbook. You have peeked, you have gone ahead, you might even have done some of what's in there, and that's completely fine. I didn't give it to you with a ton of advance warning, but I wanted to make sure that you have it today. So if you don't have it and you need a second, definitely go and download that and make sure that you have it in front of you or that you have a blank piece of paper, because you'll see the exercises on the screen. So you'll be able to do some of that, and then you can always go back and put it in the workbook. But welcome again to this workshop that I created back starting in 2021 is when I offered it for the first time. And I didn't offer it again until 2023. And I offered it in a different format at the time, but both times the reaction and the feedback from it was really strong. I just knew that there was more that I could add to it. And I wanted to take all the time that I needed to really refine the exercises and to really think about how to present that to you so that you could get the most out of it. And I'm sure that in time I'll change it again because that's how I am. And it's kind of why I named this organization Evolve because I can't stay in just one thought process. I have to constantly refine and update. But for now, this is where we are. These are going to be the exercises. So with that in mind, I want to take a moment to thank you for bringing yourself here to this moment. You are here because you want to be the best lactation care provider and educator that you can be. And you are here because you know that there are many levels to that. You want to be able to provide the best care, to provide the best information, and you want to be a resilient, strong person who shows up in the right energy for your clients. And what that takes, as you know, is to be able to approach new information and new knowledge with a certain mindset. You can't go into learning thinking that you already probably know most of it, and you have to be really aware of the lenses that you use when you are taking in new information. I think that's probably one of the most important takeaways that you can have today. You have these hidden biases. You have these lenses because you are a unique human being. Everyone has them. It's not bad to have them. It's just bad to pretend that you don't have any and think that, everything that you are looking at is the sole way to look at it or the most objective way. It has to be through your lens, and you have to be aware of where your biases, your assumptions might be. It's going to make you better at learning, and it's going to make you better at listening. So all of those things together, to me, are the reason that you're here and what you can really get out of this. So a story that I've told many times is that one of my very favorite episodes of the show ER is when some of the doctors are talking in advance of interviewing potential residents, and they're laughing about how Everyone who comes in, all the interviewees are going to say that they wanted to become a doctor because they want to help people. And then they go on to show all the interviews, and every single one says, I want to help people. And I thought it was funny, but it's also so true. So if you think about the reasons why you are here in this work, because you want to help people with breastfeeding, right? That's the most basic answer on the surface. That basic doesn't mean bad, right? Basic means fundamental. But you do want to spend time diving deeper than that and figuring out what really brought you here, what makes you special, what makes you able to reach people in a way that other people might not. And when you do that, it brings to the surface your purpose and your mission. And all of the things that we're going to talk about in these exercises are going to feed into that in a way that feels really deliberate and intentional instead of just accidental or something you arrived at. It's going to help you see those places where you are using your personal story or your personal knowledge or your personal background to be the best person that you can be for this work. So as we move through, I just want to make sure that this is in the workbook, but just make sure that this workbook is only for you and you do not have permission to share it with anyone else. We're going to go through 4 modules today. We'll talk about your personal journey and what you've experienced in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. We're going to talk about moments in your professional journey. We'll uncover those hidden ideals. This is probably the most uncomfortable part of this experience for a lot of people, but it's private. It's not meant to be shared, and there's no call anywhere for you to share this with anybody. It's for you to understand you and use those things for the best intentions. And then at the end, you'll have those tools that you'll be able to take forward because this is only the beginning. This is not anywhere near the end of a timeline for you to do this work. This is where we'll begin, and these are the steps we're going to take, and then you are going to continue this however you need to continue it afterward, if you so choose. So let's begin with the first exercises on your personal journey. You'll see in front of you pages 5, 6, 7, and 8 have a variety of checkboxes about different events, interventions, things that might have happened during your personal experiences. And you just want to check off all of the things that describe something that was part of your experiences with any and all of your babies. So when I did this, I didn't do this just for when I was pregnant with Katie or just when I was breastfeeding Allie. It's all about everything that I experienced. It's about me. So when my completed sheets, my checklist is there, that's about me. It's not about my babies. So we're going to pause for a few minutes here so that you can check off all of the things that apply to you on these next 4 pages. Okay. So you may still have a few more things to check off and things to think about, but the purpose of this exercise, I know that you live in your own head, right? You're the one that's thinking about these things. You're the one that's talking about them. But sometimes we develop patterns of how we talk about our earliest experiences with parenting. We tend to tell the same stories over and over. We tend to talk about the same things and to focus in the same areas. And I want you to have this opportunity to look at it in a different way so that you can think of your story in new ways, new patterns, identify new parts of the story that maybe didn't seem that important years ago when you started telling your story, but feel more important to you now based on what you have learned, based on what you have done, helping other people. And there are going to be a few additional exercises that we are not going to stop and do right now. If you don't do them, you're still going to have really amazing results from this workshop. But if you do them, you'll be really glad that you did. So these are some things that you're going to take some time after the workshop or another time to work on. And the first one here is really putting down the words that you normally use and that maybe now that you've done this checklist that you would add to that situation there. Tell the story of you and your babies as if you're telling someone that you have just met. What is the story that you would tell about your experiences? In regular words, conversational, just having a great time, having a little conversation, sharing with them. Things that you would want someone new to know about your experience. And then separately, I want you to chart the way you would chart on a patient or a client using the terminology, the medical terminology that you normally use in your professional role. If you work with people at home or in the community, or if you work with people in the hospital, use the terminology that you normally use and describe you as if you are pregnant with your next baby and asking about what you need to know about breastfeeding or how you could be best supported or how you could be better supported. So think of this as the same way that you would do it if you are seeing somebody prenatally. They're telling you about their last experiences. Very likely, if that's the situation, they're telling you how things went off track with their other babies or how it didn't work at all. And you are making notes so that you know how to help you. So you're going to be both the lactation care provider and the mother in this situation. It will open your eyes. It really will open your eyes to what other people might see when you are talking about your experiences and what might be useful in different types of situations that you encounter with your clients and patients. I hope that you will have some time to work on these exercises, but as I said, if you don't, the checklists themselves are going to be very useful, and we are going to go back to them later on in the workshop. So let's take a moment and think about some things that you normally think of that are big moments for your situation. The first one, I wish this had never happened. For me, I wish that some doctor at some point, an obstetrician, a pediatrician, any nurse that I saw ever in the hospital, at the doctor's offices, had ever said to me that breastfeeding and formula feeding were not the same, and that there were different things I would need to know about each one, and that I might need help. I wish somebody had told me one of those things because it would have changed the story of how I fed my babies. And I want you to think about something that was really difficult or challenging, a really tough moment that you remember very clearly about your experience feeding your babies. And then a joyous moment, something that was just one of those things when you think back, you're like, I'm so glad that I had that. And these things happen for everybody, no matter how long you breastfeed, whether you do it one time or a million times, there's some moment that you remember that you're like, that's what it was all about. And maybe it wasn't even during feeding. Maybe it was just waking up next to your baby. I'm glad personally for those experiences, waking up next to my babies. I loved that. I really enjoyed that part and it brought me joy and it still brings me joy to think about it. So this is just your opportunity to remember some of those moments. And as you're making notes there, we'll start moving into our next module. We're already on module 2. How about that? So in this module, we're going to think about some of your professional experiences. But first, I want you to really reflect on what makes you unique and special as a lactation care provider. How do you define what you're good at in this work? And what do others see in you or say about you? Some of the ways that you can figure this out, and you can mute this if you don't want to hear me talk while you're trying to do it, or you can just listen and, make some notes. Is there something that you often hear other lactation care providers say that makes you cringe, that you really disagree with? Or maybe it feels like the wrong approach and you wish they would say it differently, or you wish that they weren't saying that so loud, or maybe you don't think it's the right message at all. Is there one message that you are going to hope to leave behind, and that'll be your legacy when you are done in this work? What would you want people to remember that you said about breastfeeding? What do you most want to teach and share in your career? Does that message come from your upbringing, your culture, your personal experiences? Do you have a style in how you care for people? And how did you come upon that? How did you decide on it? Or do you don't feel like you don't have that? You're just always changing and moving along with what you're learning. Why is it important to you to build your career around a message or a style or a way of approaching lactation and breastfeeding? And is part of all of that something cultural that you know or have experienced that you are hoping to share with the world? That you want everybody to know? What do you believe about how your culture and identity are shaping your message about breastfeeding? How does it make you who you are in this work? Couple of other things to reflect on. Do you feel or know that your perspective about breastfeeding or about lactation in general are common? That's how everybody feels, or uncommon? Maybe they're different and you feel like that's what makes you unique. Who do you know in your life or in general who agrees with you or who disagrees with you? Maybe you know from just reading on social media that a lot of people disagree with the way you approach things. And you know why they disagree with you or agree with you? Where does that come from? Do you feel like your message or your style is for everyone? Or are you trying to reach a specific group of people with the way you approach breastfeeding? Who are those people? Name those people. And one example of this could be that your goal is to make sure that adolescents, teenagers who have babies, are really well supported to breastfeed their babies. Maybe that's a personal thing because you were a teenage mother, or maybe that's just a population of people that you just have a lot of affinity for. So if there's a specific group of people that you are trying to reach, it's really important that you name that because it can help to shape the decisions that you make going forward about where you work and how you use social media and how you communicate publicly. Does the place where you're currently practicing give you access to those people that you're really trying to reach? Or are you kind of feeling stuck, like you're working somewhere where that population isn't? You can't get to them because that's not where they are. And could you change that? If you could change it, how long might it take? What would it take to change that? Could you practice in a different way? Could you work in a different place? Or could you use social media or something like that to be able to reach that population, but keep your day job? So overall, that's really like, how are you feeling right now about your ability to reach the people that you're trying to reach? Is your message refined? Do you need to work on your message, or you want to work on your message? And if all of that makes you feel like, you know what, I'm not there yet, but that's okay because I'm learning something else right now, or I'm serving in a different way right now. So that's something I want to do, but I'm okay if that doesn't happen right now. I know I have time, or I know that that's coming later. Give yourself the room to say, I need a change right now, or no, I know that I will change things in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. Just deciding sort of how you're approaching that in your actual practice. So as we continue through to some of these next parts, I want to bring these forward for you, but we're not going to do these right now. This next two activities, these are ones that you can work on independently on your own, because it might take some reflection that you don't necessarily have the space to do at the moment, but you might be thinking about it later when you're doing something else, and then come back and sort of be able to answer these questions. Because these are going to be looking for a time in your personal or professional life when you felt like you weren't being heard, and you knew that the other person wasn't listening. They weren't hearing what you were saying, and they were definitely putting their own concerns before yours. And you're going to sort of dive into, how did you know that was what was happening? How it made you feel? What you learned from the experience? Maybe you learned that that's not a person that you can trust, or maybe you learned that you need to, express your needs better. There's things we learn from these. And then how did that shape your actions moving forward? Did you set different boundaries? Did you seek out that support from other people? So this doesn't have to be something that happened in your professional life. This could be something in your personal life. And you can see why, as we start to ask these questions and reflect on them, it may not be things that you're comfortable sharing with anybody else. These may be, sort of private memories that you're like, yeah, that happened to me, and I hate that it was my sister who did that to me. And I'm not going to out her for that, but that's what happened, and that really was a big deal to me. And this next one is going to be similar, but we're going to think about something positive. So we're going to look for a moment where you felt really good about the way you interacted with somebody or supported them. It could be professional, it could be personal. Again, how did you know that that was what was happening? How did it make you feel at the time? And how does it make you feel now? Was there anything about that experience that made you feel like you were just in a really good place? You were in the zone, you were really on. Like maybe you even knew, I should have been super distracted, but I wasn't. Somehow I was able to really be there for this person. And how did that like affect you going forward? Were you able to recreate that? Is that something that you built on and now you do that all the time? Did you learn something from that experience that you were able to build on? So these two exercises you can do independently, and then come back to it, make sure that you sort of answer all these questions and think about, how do those two things interact with one another? What did you learn from both of those experiences? What does it have in common? What did you learn from when someone didn't support you or hear you? And what did you learn from supporting someone else? Because those are part of your toolbox. That's part of your skill set on how you counsel people. So these next ones here, let's work on these together. Let's take some time to stop. These are going to be professional things. Sometimes in the medical field, if you work in a hospital, we call these sentinel events, where those are things that happen that everybody has to like completely stop and start, like really figure out what happened, start over. Um, and these are going to be things for you. It could be that you made a mistake or you missed something. Maybe you overreacted in a situation. You acted in a way that you're not terribly proud of. Maybe you're ashamed or embarrassed about what you did or how it happened. Um, you know, these can be embarrassing things. One of mine that I've done for this exercise, and each time I do it, it sort of comes out a little bit differently, was a time where I received a patient complaint in the hospital that really caught me off guard because I thought that I was being the best, most objective and neutral lactation consultant that I could be in the moment. And the complaint essentially was that I was not nice. I did not treat somebody very well. That's how they received the way that I was acting. And it took me a lot of work to figure out what could I learn from that situation? Because of course, when you get confronted with something like that, you feel defensive and you feel like you want to go through everything and say, see, I was right here. See, this was what I did right, and this was what I did right. But sometimes you have to take those moments to step back and say, okay, yeah, you did some things that you're okay with and you feel like you did it right, but obviously you did something wrong because it didn't work out right, or you're feeling weird about it. So once I did that, then I was able to start seeing myself in a different light, thinking about the way that other people were perceiving me and my actions, and receiving criticism about what I could change. So when you look at these things, think about like when it was in time, like, was it in May of 2017? Where were you in your lactation work? Were you studying to become an IBCLC? Were you an IBCLC for 12 years at that point and you were just starting out working in the hospital? Like, where were you? What were you doing? And where were you in your career at that point? A brief description, enough for you to remember what actually happened, and then start thinking about how did you resolve it? What did you do? And how you felt at the time. Did you feel embarrassed? Did you feel mad? Did you feel defensive? Did you feel like you wanted to hide your head under a paper bag and not ever interact with that person again? I know I felt like that. I didn't want to run into her in the hallway. I didn't want to run into her husband in the hallway because he was the unfortunate person who had to deliver that message that they thought was not nice. Um, so yeah, I wanted to hide and I didn't really want to deal with it. So just kind of a way for you to remember this so that you can think about it and think, I mean, you might write these things down, you might reflect on this and think, I learned a lot from that, and I'm glad that happened. But you might think, I hate thinking of that. Either way, I'm telling you right now, it affected you going forward, whether you feel like you dealt with it and you learned from it or you didn't. It still affected you. It still changed you. So it's important to sort of memorialize that in this type of way. So I'm sure that you've made some notes on at least one of these events, and I've included 2 sheets to do this because I think it's important to make sure that you think about at least 2 times. If in your mind you're like, I need to go through a couple of different things that have happened for me, great, make an extra copy and write those things down or write it on the back of the page. But at least 2 is going to give you a sense of all of those emotions that come up when you start to think about those things. So whatever came out of it, they really are some of the biggest events that you had. What you do with them now and going forward is really what matters. This is what's going to affect people and it's going to affect you. So it's not just about what you learn and how you change how you care for people in the future. It changes how you feel about yourself. It affects your confidence, and it teaches you if you actually know how to learn. Like if you really know how to say to yourself, maybe I can change. Maybe new information can become something that I incorporate into my insights. Or maybe you look at these situations and you say, I didn't take enough out of them. Maybe I should think about that. Or maybe you say, when those things happened, that's actually what led to whether I dealt with them or not, right? I was in a bad place then. So what's the lesson? I'm not going to let myself get in a bad place like that again, right? That's why I want you to think about when they happened and what you were doing in your career. So that would be one where this first question, how confident are you that you can avoid these types of events in the future? You know, say your situation happened at a time where your life was really, really overwhelming. Lots of stuff was happening in your personal life that felt like it made your professional life difficult, but you've worked on that and now you have a much different outlook and you're able to leave your personal things at home and you have a better personal life, so your professional life is less stressful. And so you do have a way of avoiding that. It sounds like you probably learned that from that and moved on. And how important is it to you that these events don't repeat? For me, one of the things that really came out of that for me was that sometimes people were not going to receive the information and the words that I shared with them in the way that I intended them, right? At first, it can sound like, well, people are always going to complain, right? People are always going to come up with something that they don't like about what you said. But what it really was that sometimes I'm going to say things in a way that 99 people would be fine with the way I said it, but that one person, it didn't land right. The most important thing to do in those situations is that if that person comes back to you and is like, that was rude. I can't even hear what you're saying to me about breastfeeding because I think you're judging me. Then you look them in the eyes and you say, that is totally not what I meant, and I am so sorry. I did not mean to make you feel that way, and I am really sorry about that. How can I make this better? And I definitely have been able to do that. So incorporating that, it's not that those events are not going to repeat. I can't guarantee that every single person will hear what I say and be cool with it and think that I'm supportive, right? I'm going to do the best I can. And if it turns out that I don't do that every time and somebody comes to me, I'm definitely going to face up to it a lot better than I was able to in that situation. So it did change my practice style, it did change my routines. It impacted the type of training and education I've pursued since then because it identified for me a type of situation that I realized I have bias about. That's where that came from. So that's going to be the next piece of what we're working on here in these exercises. If I could go back in time and erase them, I don't think that I would want to erase it. I hate the fact that for that person, part of her experience of getting lactation help in the hospital was that my words were rude and it felt bad for her. I hate that. I don't want that. I would want to erase that for her, but I wouldn't want to erase it for me because I learned from it and it stopped me, it slowed me down, it made me humble. I would not change it because I learned so much from it. I would only change it because I wouldn't want her to feel that way. I would not want her to have to take that forward. So that's what this part of the exercise is truly about, figuring out those places. And nobody is, going to react to these kinds of moments. There's no perfect way to react. There's no perfect answer to any of this. All that matters is that you are reflecting on it. you are thinking about it. And you don't have to think about it forever. You don't have to come back to it if you don't want to, but you might. You might come back to these moments and think about the ways that you moved through it. What did it teach you? Whether you would feel like they could repeat and what would you do differently? Those are ways that you can really think about places that you could grow, different things that you could do in the future. So as I said, this next module, your hidden ideals, this is another part of this. um, okay, so we're going to do this work that is deeply personal. But it's really, really important, and it's going to show you some of those places where what happens is when you don't know about these, when you don't acknowledge really to yourself that this is how you feel about things, it sometimes can leak through in the way that you're caring for people and the information that you give them, but it can also make things feel weird for you. It can make it hard for you to learn new things because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound aligned with what you're thinking. And it just makes you feel kind of stuck. So start by thinking about remembering what was your headspace when you were in your first experience of learning about breastfeeding and lactation in a formal way. This is after you decided you wanted to do this for work or as a volunteer, and you went to a class, or maybe you were taking a class online. Your first experience with learning lactation, did the information you were hearing make you feel like, what? That doesn't sound right. Like, that's not how it was for me. Or did it make you feel like, wow, yes, everybody goes through that, or that's common, that's normal? Um, where did it put you? Did it leave you feeling like this instructor is out of their mind? That's not what it was like at all. And whether that felt like, was it you or was it them, right? Was it you just only having your experience of your one or two or three babies and learning this information? Or was it an instructor that just wasn't reaching you because the way the information that they were presenting just seemed so foreign to you? It was so different, or it was so much not taking a really wide perspective that things can be different for different people. So with that in mind, thinking about that headspace, how did all of that information sort of match up with what you knew and what you had personally experienced? Did it make it feel like this was going to be a tougher journey than you thought? And I'm not talking about thinking this information's hard, this is sciencey, and I'm not that good at this. Nothing like that. But just, did it reaffirm what you had experienced or what you felt about breastfeeding and lactation? Or did it make you feel like you're different? And did you feel like I'm different because my experiences were unique and other people can learn from that? Or is it more like, well, this is what happened for me, so that can't be right? Okay. So just however that left you feeling, all of those things are valid. So as you start to go through here, what you're doing is you are telling the story, the ideal, optimal, perfect story in your mind, in your heart. This is how pregnancy and birth and feeding happen, and conception. I'm sorry, I left that out. Parenting choices can be any part of having a baby and raising a baby that's important for you. Whatever that means to you, that it's perfect. Like, this is how everyone should do it. If everyone did it like this, a lot of things would be easier. This is my perfect story. And it doesn't have to be your own story. It can be the thing that you think, I wish it had been that way for me. But it's the one that makes your heart feel like, okay, yeah, that's the way. That is the way. So I'm going to give a couple of silent moments here for you to think about this. Make some notes for yourself. Okay. Now, when I first came up with this exercise, I didn't realize how many ways it would make me feel just to do it. I was excited to do it. I was I thought it was really cool to get to write this story because you don't tend to think about it this way in this whole long trajectory, this spectrum of how things unfold over time when somebody is going to have a baby, then they get pregnant, they give birth, they're experiencing those first hours and days. They're making choices about what they're doing with their baby. Could be about where does their baby sleep or whether they use a pacifier or, whether they treat their children as the gender that they were born with, how they feed their baby, all of these things. And then I also felt, once I put pen to paper, kind of embarrassed about the fact that I had a perfect and an ideal in my head. And I really started thinking about where did those ideals come from? Did they come from my personal experience? Did they come from my culture and my upbringing? Did they come from what I had seen over the years? They come from all those places. And so they can be hard to, it's fun to make this whole story, to be able to write it like this. But it also, when you look at it, sometimes it might make you feel like, if people knew that I felt this way, they might not feel the same way about me that they do. So it's uncomfortable work. It really is. Is not necessarily something that you want to broadcast to everybody if that's not comfortable for you. So what we see, however, is that sometimes people, when they get into birth work and infant feeding work, their ideal, perfect, optimal is everywhere. It's all over the way that they market themselves and the way that they are seeking out clients. And it doesn't necessarily align with evidence-based care or respecting people's autonomy or just the way that we want to approach everyone in a client-centered way. So that's why it's really, really important to know how you feel about all these things and start looking for the places in your practice where you're listening to someone tell you how they conceived their baby or what their pregnancy was like, or telling you their birth story, or listening about how early postpartum was, or how they're feeding their baby. If your mental filter feels like it's working really hard to stop you from saying things out loud, it's probably because their story is very incongruent with what you in your heart feel it should look like. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not wrong to be, to have this ideal story and it's misaligned with the person that you're taking care of, as long as you know that. As long as you know that your mental filter is keeping you from saying things that aren't nice or aren't supportive, and that you have to make sure that you are listening and keeping the focus on them. That's what your mental filter is really for. It's making sure that you can communicate with other humans in a way that is respectful and supportive, especially when you're doing it in a professional capacity. So totally okay to have all of this. It's just about making sure that you know what is coming from your heart and what you really believe, what you know on a scientific or physiologic level, and how you plan to use that whenever you hear something that doesn't necessarily align with that. So, some more things that you can think about here are times where you hear from a client what they're doing or what they're thinking about doing, and it makes you think something like, well, gosh, if they would just do this. Or if you're having conversations with your colleagues where everybody's starting to sort of pile on, like, these mothers, they all want to just do this to make it easier on themselves, or they're all doing that because they don't know any better. What are those things? Where are those things specifically, topic-wise, behavior-wise? Where are those happening? Are you sitting around with your clients saying, all these people are going through sleep training, and I don't understand why. Or everybody's falling for, these messages about what pacifiers are good for or not good for. Whatever things that you are finding yourself like led into feeling, these things that are coming up a lot. Are you having resistance around something? One of the things that came up for me a lot is about infant sleep. When I first started working on these exercises, I didn't realize how strongly I felt my personal ideals, perfect world kind of experience, how much I was putting that on what I was willing to learn about infant sleep. Every time I do this work, I realize something else new about myself. So I'm not saying I did these exercises and I fixed it and now I'm perfect. No, not at all. Every time I do it, I realize something new. The sleep one was really big for me. I realized that my feelings, my beliefs about how babies should sleep and how parents should treat infant sleep were very dismissive of the possibility that anyone would even think that it was hard. So what that did was it sort of shut off my mind to learning anything that would have been useful for anybody who was feeling like infant sleep was hard. Because my mind kept saying, why are they making this so hard? Why don't they just do that? Why don't they just do this? They don't need to learn that. They don't need these books. They don't. I mean, over and over, I just found myself getting really frustrated once we got to the part of, the consulting relationship where we were talking about sleep. And, the things that I was looking for and looking at online, if it had anything to do with let's approach infant sleep from a scientific vantage point, I was like, no, you don't have to. Why? Why would we need to do that? I don't understand why people just make this so hard. There's no need to have all of this. And then I started looking at this and thinking, am I saying that because of my personal beliefs? I think I was. I mean, I know I was at this point. So I had to recognize that in myself so that when I begin to talk to somebody about sleep, I can take a pause, I can listen to what they say, and also so that when I am confronted with choices about education, things that I want to read, research articles, I'm not seeking out articles that confirm what I already believe. I'm not avoiding reading or learning about infant sleep simply because I already have an opinion. Like, you don't realize that you're doing it when you're doing it. But a lot of times we find that the things that we're interested in when it comes to lactation or pregnancy or anything about babies, we're drawn to education about the same topics, about the same behaviors, about the same parts of it because of confirmation bias. We want to hear that we are already right, that we are already doing the right thing. It's uncomfortable to imagine I'm going to read this research article and it's going to tell me that the stuff I've been saying all these years is wrong. This is something that, I think I saw and a lot of us were able to see very easily when we started to see new information coming out about thrush on the nipple and about how we help people who have mastitis. We're getting this new information in the last like 5 years or so. We're getting people saying, we've been saying these things for a long time, and it actually might be this instead. It actually might be that that's not possible, or that this is more helpful than the things we've been saying. It is really, really hard to think to yourself, for 15 years, I have been telling people this, and I was wrong. Oopsie. It's really, really hard to do that. And it's necessary because science is a process. It's not a destination where you've arrived and you've figured it out. It's always going to evolve and change, and we're going to learn new things. So we're in a scientific field. It's also a relational field. There's also many ways we can describe it, but it's based on physiological scientific things that we're learning about every day. So that's why it can be difficult to, find these things. But once you know that you have these places, you can say, I have a bias about this. Maybe the next time I have a choice about what education I'm going to pursue, I'm going to choose that because I really need to hear a different perspective, or I really need an update on what is happening now. What have we learned? I need to hear this. That's what this is for. This really will help you. And again, it isn't necessarily something that you want to broadcast to the whole world, or maybe you do, because maybe you feel like I'm okay with saying this so that other people can realize that maybe they're doing this too. We all do it. Confirmation bias is just, it's something that is, this is part of our critical thinking skills, and one of the things that we learn in the process of becoming a lactation consultant is we're supposed to learn how to approach research and how to integrate it into our practice in an objective way. But with confirmation bias on board, constantly seeking out affirmation of what we already think that we know, how are we ever going to, absorb new information? There is other information other than just what supports what we already thought or what we think. So we need to be open to that. And the way to be open is to recognize the places where we think we know and say to ourselves, maybe I don't know. Maybe there is a reason that other people say this or do that. Maybe there's a reason that that works for some people. And again, not at all saying that anyone has this figured out, least of all me. Every time we do this, we can make it better. We can modify the way we're approaching these topics. And that's really what this page is for. Think about the things that you've come up with just in this short amount of time that you've done these exercises. Where do your feelings, beliefs, opinions differ? If you find any places like that from, if you're looking at your beliefs, maybe that's not what everybody considers normal, or maybe it's something that's technically, scientifically not physiologically normal, or maybe it's not in line with the evidence base. It's just how you feel, or it's just how you were raised, or it's just what you did, or anything where what you think and what you feel about it might not be acceptable to say to other people or to expect of them. Like, it's not right to expect that everybody would do this, but deep down you really feel like they should, right? Like it would make everything easier. Just write it down for yourself. Find yourself these tools that are going to help you bypass that whenever you need to. So, for example, if your limiting thought is everyone should give birth in a hospital because it's the safest thing, and that comes out sometimes as, weren't you scared when you gave birth at home? These things don't come out because you're trying to be mean or because you're trying to judge someone or anything like that. Sometimes it's a genuine question. Weren't you scared to give birth at home? That comes from your assumption and your belief that being in the hospital makes it safe. The first thing you do is you challenge the thought. Remind yourself, birth happens in hospitals, in homes, in birth centers, in unexpected places. Sometimes people give birth in the car on the way, right? People also have the right to choose where they give birth. They get to pick it. And some people do not have control. The baby was coming and that's where they were, right? Then you can reframe it. Okay, yeah, I'm reminding myself I know enough about the fact that births happen in multiple places. I understand that birth can be safe anywhere and it can be unsafe anywhere. So I know enough to avoid sounding judgmental and to avoid becoming overly worried about something like that. I'm not going to insert my fears to them and present it as that's riskier than something else, unless that's the evidence base, right? So we have to look at what we're believing. Is that what science or research actually says? Even if I am worried about it, maybe I do have these doubts or concerns, I know how to balance that and not put my fears and my anxieties on them. I can present the facts to them in a balanced way so that they're not scared or disrespected. If my concern is really a valid thing they do need to think about or take an action for, I can present that in a way that they'll be able to hear me rather than hearing that I think hospital birth is unsafe and they made a bad choice. Then, they're going to hear, here's something else that we want to think about, just based on the fact that this is where your baby was born. So thinking about how you can reframe the way you say things or how you approach it. If you can just start with the most conversational way and then the reframe. Congratulations on your new baby. I don't know why I put a question mark there on the page. How are you feeling about how your birth went? And when you start the conversation with that, you might get the person to say, I was a little weirded out because I thought my baby was going to be born in the hospital and they were born in the car, right? So there's just these different ways that we can reframe it for ourselves that are going to help us make that space, like that pause of time, and stall until we can remind ourselves of how we can approach this in a way that feels more balanced. Because it's perfectly fine and very normal for us to have opinions, to have preferences or ideals on all of these things. It's just important that we don't let those opinions dictate the way that we care for and talk to other people during that time frame. And sometimes it's not even just happening when we're caring for them in a sort of formal way, but it happens just in conversation. And that can also affect how people think of you and think of how effective you might be as a care provider. So for this exercise, I've provided, a couple of sheets so that you have a couple of opportunities to think about some of the places where you have some opinions. I know that one of the ones that I'm working on right now is how I feel about breast pumps. And I just listened to another podcast this morning where they were talking about breast pumps and some new research about pumping. Um, they were giving some new information we haven't really looked at before, some very fresh, recent research on how many people are using the pumps, but also how many people in this study were actually exclusively pumping. Those are really important things to know because what I heard did not line up with what I've previously heard or what I believed. So it's like, okay, now I have three different things I've got to look at here and figure out where does this new information fit in how I feel about this. So, these are sort of ongoing things that we're going to be visiting throughout our career as we learn. I think I put 5 of those sheets there. Yeah. Next, we will look at some things about how your energy levels are showing up for your work. Think about what kind of clients when you get to work with them, you're very energized. I'm really excited. Can't wait to see this person. This is going to be really good because I'm good at this. Or this is going to be really good because I love working with babies of this age. Who energizes you? Like what types of situations energize you? Maybe you're energized by the types of clients who sit right in that zone of like, this is my interest. This is my message I hope to leave behind. Like, this is my perfect target audience. That gives me energy. Then think about you wish you had more clients who needed whatever thing you want to provide, or maybe you wish you had more clients who needed less, whatever that is. It's going to tell you something about how you're feeling about your work right now. Think if there's any times where you're like, man, I really wish they wouldn't do this, or they wouldn't act this way, or they wouldn't adopt this behavior. And this could be something about how they're taking care of their baby, or it could be something about when one of my clients cancels an appointment or, doesn't pay, whatever thing brings up emotions for you about your practice itself. And then another positive one for you. What do other people say about you? If somebody else in the healthcare world was going to recommend you to a new mom, what would they say? Why would they want you to see them? What about you? Oh, she's just the nicest. Oh, she's so funny. You'll forget that you're, struggling so much. Or she knows everything you need to know about twins. So that's the person that you need to see. And it makes you feel what? Maybe it's that Well, she knows everything about twins. You're just going to love her. And that makes you feel like, oh, great, I'm only known for that. I really want to be able to help everybody, but everybody just keeps sending me twin moms. Okay, so whatever thing makes you feel some way about the way that other people describe what you do. And then a couple other ones. I'm the most tired when my day goes like this. It could be that, um, there were 12 moms at our baby cafe today, and I was wiped out, right? Or maybe it's I had 3 home visits today, and I'm exhausted because where they lived was so spread out, and I spent a lot of the day traveling. I feel disappointed when one of my clients does this. Maybe they, again, cancel an appointment. Maybe they um, don't follow the lactation care plan that you made with them. Or maybe they just don't seem like they're able to pay attention when you're together and you don't really know why. The most frustrating thing about my work doesn't have to be about your clients and how they act. Could be, I hate traveling to home visits that are really spread out across town. Or I don't like that I don't get paid well for what I do. I feel like I deserve more. Whatever is the most frustrating thing. And then when this happens, I remember exactly why I got into this line of work. Who is that client that you see that you're able to talk to, or that type of consult you have where you're like, this is why I do it. Don't care about the money. Don't care about the traveling. Don't care about, where I'll be in 10 years. These are the people that I need. These are my people that I'm reaching. All of that is going to feed right into our module 4. These are going to be your tools. Our first exercise, this is where we're going to go back to pages 5 through 8. That was your checklist of what happened for you and your babies during your pregnancies and your births and your feeding experiences. If you have a highlighter and a pen, then it's a little easier to do this, but if you only have a pen, it's totally fine. I'll tell you both ways to do it. So the first thing I want you to do is take your pen and circle the things that are on there that you're like, I cannot talk about that. Maybe you're in the situation where this wasn't that long ago and you're like, I don't think about that. It happened, but that's not something that I think about a lot. And I can't really talk about it because it's hard to describe or it's hard to explain, or I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Or it's just complicated. It's not something you would want to tell other people because there's a lot of factors and you don't want to have to explain everything about yourself. Just circle those. Circle those things because you don't owe those to anybody. Those are yours and you don't have to tell anyone, right? It's important to know and name the things that you are not willing to talk about. Some people are not going to ever talk about anything that happened to them in their experience, and that is fine. You don't owe it to anyone. It's very easy to fall into this trap, I think, that we have in this field of, in order to reach people, I have to tell them what it was like for me. You don't. You don't owe it to them. And it's something in the hospital that was something I learned really quickly. I never thought about this happening, but because my experience of helping people with breastfeeding and lactation began in a support group, I was used to being in a place where other people generally knew my situation, my feeding situation, and what was going on for me, or they knew I was breastfeeding just because I was there, and they knew how old my babies were because they could see them in front of them, right? But then I start working in the hospital and going into postpartum rooms where there's people with newborns, strangers to me. I'm a stranger to them. And they ask me, well, did you breastfeed? And I kind of, it was really an unexpected reaction for me, but my gut was, I don't have to tell you that. I don't want to tell you that. I don't want to talk about that. I don't even know you. It didn't feel, just like anything that I could do. So that was my experience learning about how different people react. And I learned through, working and going to rooms with some of my colleagues, some of them were totally fine with talking about it in a room. It just never felt like something that I could put in a package that I could say to a stranger that would be useful. Why would they want to know that? How does that have to do anything to do with whether I can help you right now or not? That's kind of part of it too. It kind of made me a little angry, like that doesn't make me more credible, whether I breastfed or not. It's not for you to use as judgment. Because what if I didn't, but my whole motivation for being here, I got all this education and all this training so that I could help people better than the help that I got, right? That's why that's just not a good way to insert yourself into the situation. It's not about you, it's about them. That's what you're there to help them for. So now you have those things circled on there that you're never going to talk about. Maybe you circled all the things because you are not comfortable talking about those with anybody. But if there are things on there that you already do talk about, that you already like talking about, and that sort of fit into that bubble of this is the message I want to leave behind, these are the people that I really want to have an impact on, which parts of your experience would be useful for them to know? Where did you learn things that you're able to share with them? Those are the things that you could probably talk about a little bit at length. If you were getting to know somebody, maybe they had been to your support group or you had had 3 consults with them now. And so you've built this relationship through your consulting and you feel more comfortable sharing things about yourself. These are the things that would be useful to be able to share, that would be educational or supportive and make them feel better about their situation or just able to manage this situation and to trust you as time goes on. And some of the things that you use the highlighter for here, they might be things that you occasionally bring up, things that you might just use to build rapport. Oh, you know what? I also had a C-section. I know exactly what you mean. I couldn't get up for days, and it really was very frustrating. Let's talk about ways that we can get your baby, latched in this position, or let's talk about ways that you can manage that pain or get the help that you need. Things that you only bring up once in a while. So, I mean, now you have in front of you, in black and white, you have your circled topics that you really aren't comfortable talking about, don't really want to. You know what those things are. Maybe you don't want to talk about the way your babies were born. Maybe you don't want to talk about how you fed your babies, or you don't want to talk about whether you used a pacifier or not, why you made those decisions, because it feels too personal. And then you also have in these boxes things that you do talk about, things that you are comfortable sharing in a way that's educational for people and helps them to feel supported. This is a tool that you have. You can change these things. You can cross things off. You can develop more things that you can talk about, but you can be now more intentional about how you talk about your personal experiences, especially if those are uncommon or unique, or just things that a lot of people experience that it would be helpful for them to know that you have those experiences too. So this one here, you may need a little more time to fill this out than we have here, but I want you to go through these self-awareness steps and just answer them for yourself. There's no right or wrong answer, and there's no reason that if you check off, 4 things on here that say, I want to work on this, that doesn't mean next week. That means these are things that you can take forward knowing you want to work on them. You want to put something into it. There are things on here that you might check off no. And also, I don't want to work on this. There might be things that you say yes, and I want to work on this. So some of them are positive, some of them are negative STEM type questions. So they're not necessarily all like you are supposed to be answering one way. They're just different ways of thinking about different things. And there's no right or wrong. There's only just knowing more about you and how your work sort of fits into your greater purpose and your mission in doing this work. You got 2 pages of these prompts to think about. And like I said, you might not feel like you have the time to think about these things right this second, but these are things you can take forward. A nice piece of your toolkit to understand what you want to work on and how you might do that. And think about why working on it might serve your mission and your purpose or not. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe that means your mission and your purpose need to change. Maybe it means you're not able to work on your purpose and mission right now, but later on you will be. So just putting it into perspective of all those different things that we've looked at today. Are you able to work toward your purpose and your mission, your lifelong legacy right now? Or are you, happy with where you are and you know that's coming later on? Now you have this list of some things that you can think about that you'll be able to work on as time goes on. And here's a nice little to-do list where you can write down some of the things. So essentially, as you're thinking about those things that you might be working on, things will pop to mind that you'll be like, oh yeah, if I wanted to do this, I think one of the things that I should do is probably take a course on this, read some research articles on that, have a conversation with this person that I heard of or read about on social media. Whatever things pop into your head about how you could work on those things that you want to work on. It could be really straightforward, like, I just don't know enough about why people struggle with infant sleep. It seems so easy to me. I need to take this course, read this book, talk to these people, talk to some moms, whatever resources and steps that you think that you might be able to take. This is a working list. It's not the end. You'll think of other things and you'll come up with other ideas as time goes on. And then you can take those goals, just those larger goals that you had there, and you can put them into quarters. Instead of trying to put them into, I'm going to do this next week, you're going to put it into, this is what I'm going to focus on in the first quarter. I'm going to learn some more about infant sleep. I'm going to read every research article that comes my way, and I'm just going to reflect on that. That's going to be my one thing that I'm thinking about through that time. And then when the calendar changes over and we hit quarter 2, I might move on to something else, or I might need another quarter to work on this same thing for a while. It might be bigger than I think. So in summary, for everything that we've worked on today, you've had a lot of opportunities to think about things that might be repeating in your head, things that might make you feel like you're stuck. Times where you might have been feeling like you're frustrated, maybe like you're burned out a little bit, maybe you feel like you're not making the impact that you really wanted to make. And we thought about things that might be making your mental filter work really hard and, have you feel like you're constantly having to quiet yourself instead of being able to express yourself. The reason we're thinking about all these things is because essentially the main takeaway here is that what you believe and your personal experience is not necessarily aligned with what is considered to be evidence-based practice or client-centered care. So you have to be able to recognize in yourself where those things diverge so that you can make sure that you are practicing in an evidence-based way and that you are always staying focused on the client. It really, really helps you to think about these things outside of when you're practicing. That's why you showed up here today. That's why you brought this time to this exercise and, to this intentional work on yourself. What are the moments in your work, in your practice that really, really drain you? And what are the hidden biases that you identified through these exercises? What are those beliefs that are in there and they matter to you, they're part of you? Are those things lining up? Like those personal beliefs and the moments that drain you, is that where you're getting stuck? Is that where you're having those clients that really feel like they take a lot out of you, or they frustrate you, or they're the hardest ones? Like, if all my clients today are having this problem, that's going to be the worst day because that's the hardest thing for me. Are those things lining up? Is there something that you could do or reframe how you approach those situations? Because you can't avoid situations where things don't line up with what you believe they should be. So you need to be able to have these strategies here on this sheet, page 39, that are going to help you to challenge those negative internal reactions that you're having and be able to foster that mindset that is going to help you connect with your clients better. You can integrate these, you can make changes, and you can do this over and over and over. Reframing your internal reactions with empowering alternatives for yourself and your client, not just for one of you, for both of you, because they want someone to show up who's going to take care of them. And you can't do that if you are frustrated all the time, or feeling burned out, or feeling like you're not in alignment with what you were supposed to be doing. One other note about this work, this has been really specifically designed for people who are providing lactation care. Now, one of the things that I learned very quickly in my own career was that sometimes when you get into lactation work, you are then also required to take a lot of training, become a childbirth educator, learn about birth. You have to know about birth in order to understand breastfeeding. And you need to know about breastfeeding to understand birth. So what happens is, whichever side of that you enter on, you have to learn about the other one. And then sometimes, and I know there's at least one person who's here today live with us who has had this situation, the thing that they're doing most of the time is not the thing that they're most passionate about, but it's the thing that helps them make this work financially viable. So they have to do it that way right now. Maybe they won't forever, but they have to do it that way right now. If that's you, it can feel like you're not in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, with what your purpose and your mission are. So that's another place that you can sort of approach, what am I supposed to be doing? When will I be able to do the thing I'm supposed to be doing? Or how can I change what I'm doing right now to have more access to that target population that I really want to reach? Or how can I add that on to what I do? Can I make it where I write a book, or I use social media, or I do talks in my community that I can teach people about this other thing so that I feel like I'm still meeting that mission and I don't feel so frustrated all the time? There's always a way to add or subtract to what you're doing to reduce the pressure. Believe it or not, sometimes adding something reduces the pressure. So I just wanted to point that out because it's so common for people to have that experience of, the thing I really care about is not the thing that makes me money, so I have to do the other thing. And they're both related, but that doesn't necessarily fulfill me. So as you sort of move through this, just make sure that you're thinking about that part of it as well. And it's not that that's actually kind of making you feel stuck. So all of those things together, hopefully all of these exercises, as you went through them here in the workshop, but as you go through them separately also, because we went through some, remember that you're going to work on independently and at a different time, especially those ones right back at the beginning where you're going to tell your story of you and your babies to somebody that you just met. And then you're going to chart your story of you and your babies as if you are the care provider taking care of you. And when you do that, you'll see your own experience in a different way. And you will see the places where using that story with your clients could really make it better, could help you feel more connected with them and them more connected with you, and allow you to see the places where you'll need to make a little space for yourself to learn more, to be open to other opinions or other ways of doing things, and understand what you should be doing with your continuing education. How to make the choices about where you invest your time and money for continuing education and that you're not just following your confirmation bias to the topics that you're most interested in over and over and over again. It's easy to do that and to tell yourself, well, I'm just specializing in this thing because I'm so interested in it. Okay, but we also have to have a well-rounded approach to what we do because we don't see people for just one thing. So just looking at all of those things together, I hope this has, left you with some thoughts of what you are good at, where your strengths are, what people know about you and tell other people about you, and also where you feel like you could do some work whenever you have the time and whenever you have the space for that, so that you never feel like you have to just show up minimally or, you know, bring one limited viewpoint to the situation. Hopefully that is helpful for you and something that is going to really transform how you look at your own practice in the future. And I look forward to your feedback, both about the workshop and how it worked for you. And if there's anything, from your personal outcomes that you feel like sharing, I would love to hear about those things too, because of course, I'm interested in how this works for you and how you're feeling about working in this field, because honestly, that's what I care about the most. I want all of us to feel good about the work that we do and be able to do it for as long as we want to, and that we only stop because we want to stop and not because we're just totally burned out and overwhelmed and frustrated. So thank you for your energy and your attention and your care today. I really do appreciate you and what you do and how you always show up for me. It really is very meaningful to me, and I hope that this workshop was super meaningful for you. And I wish you all the best, and I will speak to you very soon.